Hey, what it do? It's Mario out here coming at you with some review about quadratic equations, something we learned this year in grade 11. So I'm gonna be showing this lesson on quadratic equations through a question on a standard form. So here we have what a standard form equation is. So it's y equals ax plus bx plus c. And I'm gonna be using this equation right here to show you how to solve the equation, but not only that, I'm gonna show you how to graph it, which is very important throughout your math career. And so the first step to solve the equation is to find out the values of a, b, and c. So here we have the values of a, b, and c. A is a positive 1. Why? Because x has no number in front of it, so it automatically becomes a 1. And b has a -6, and c has a 5. Our next step for this equation, in order to solve it, what we gotta do is we gotta factor the equation. In order to factor the equation, we gotta, here, I'm gonna write it down. We gotta be able to find two numbers that you add them and they become a 6, and if you multiply it, they become a 5. So I'm thinking a -5 and a -1. Why? Because if you multiply them, they become +5, but if you add them, they become -6. So there you have the factor. And now what we gotta do is find the roots of the equation, because we gotta be able to find, so essentially the roots are the points at which the parabola will intercept at the x-axis. And in order to find this, we gotta replace the y with a 0, and we bring down the equation, which is x -5, then x -1, and we have to find numbers that will equal to 0 if you add them or subtract them to 5, and another number that by adding or subtracting will give you a 0. So here I'm thinking a +5, because if you subtract a -5 from a +5, it'll give you 0, and same thing with the 1. But instead, it will be a 1, a +1. So here I'm gonna write it down. X equals to +5, x equals to 1. And that essentially becomes the roots of the graphing part of this equation. So here we have the graph, right? We're gonna start to label it here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let me put down the dots that will essentially become the roots. So here's 1 and 2. So that will be the place at which the parabola will intercept in the x-axis, and that's going to be really important. Our next step is to find the axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry is a number that will be symmetrical if you cut it, like if you cut the graph in half, then one side would be symmetrical to the other side. So in this case, since there's a 1 and a 5, it'd be the number the third one here. So here, let me split it in half. There you go. And as you can see, you have 1, 2 here, and then 1, 2 here. So that would be the axis of symmetry. Let's label that. And then let's underline it. Boom, pow, there you go. And with the axis of symmetry, what we'll be able to do is find the vertex of the graph. So the vertex essentially is the lowest or highest point of the graph. And so we gotta find this right now. So in order to do that, we gotta replace the x with a 3, which is the axis of symmetry. There you go. Bam. Now we do the equation, but this case x will equal to 3. 3 squared minus 6 times 3 plus 5. This will give you a 9. This will give you a negative 18. And then you just bring down the 5. And all that will give you a 4. Because you subtract the 9 from the 18, gives you a negative 9. Then you add that with 5, it'll be negative 4. So that will give you the axis of symmetry. So here, we're going to label it in our graph. 1, 2, 3, 4, right here. This is our axis of symmetry. Or vertex. Sorry about that. Or highest or lowest point in the graph of our parabola. There you go. And our next step would be to find the y-intercept. So like the parabola is going to be intercepting at the y-axis, and we gotta be able to find that number. And here's the formula for that. All you gotta do is instead of an x, you're gonna have a 0. So it's going to be 0 squared minus 6, 0, and then a 5. So if you 0 times 0 cancels, so it'll be a 0, and then negative 6 times 0 also becomes a 0. So at the end, you're just gonna have a positive 5. Now the positive 5 becomes the y. So right here in our graph, we're gonna put that right here, 5. And that's where the parabola is gonna intercept at the y-axis. So let's write that down. Now, what we gotta do is make sure that we know if our parabola is gonna be positive or negative. And that's very simple. That's gotta be the most easiest thing from this equation, because all you have to do is go to the a value and see if it's positive or negative. In our equation, it will be a 1, a positive 1. So that means our parabola will be positive. That's what a positive parabola looks like, as most of you might remember. And there's a negative one, because smiley face, sad face. There you go. And in our case, since we have a positive, we're gonna draw it now. So here we're gonna have a low point of negative 4. Let's label that right there. And all we gotta do is draw the parabola by connecting all our points, including the vertex. So right here, we come down to the 1, down to the vertex, up to 5, and then boom, right there, you have it. You're done. And I hope you remember everything about quadratic equations. I hope this helped. Thank you. Peace.